Good morning, Central Kentucky. This is Sandra Leslie White coming to you live from the studios here, 99.1 FM, life-changing radio. So shouting out to all of you on the radio this morning and live streaming on WJMM.com around the country. Good morning, Facebook Live. Good morning. So, have you ever been around a construction site, okay, and seen a wrecking ball? I mean, I noticed, we've got a lot of construction going around here in Lexington in Central Kentucky. We're located, for those of you who are not from here, right outside of Lexington, Kentucky, Central Kentucky, the Bluegrass. We have a lot of construction going on, particularly around the medical center. And the other day, I saw this massive crane. I actually saw this wrecking ball. And I thought, wow, that is so fascinating. And it's fascinating because they are so controlled. They're so exact about where they're swinging and what it's hitting. And it's amazing to me that something that awesome can be in control of its motion and its object for destruction. So anyway, listen to this definition from the Cambridge Dictionary of what a wrecking ball is. A large, heavy metal ball that is swung against a building in order to knock it down because it is no longer needed. Okay, where am I going? This is a Bible teaching radio show. Where am I going with this? A large, heavy metal ball that is swung against a building in order to knock it down because it is no longer needed. So hang on to that, because it's no longer needed. We are going to talk about Yahweh and Jesus, as wrecking balls as they wreck religion in Hosea 6:6 and Matthew 9:9-13 today. So the title of the message, if you're just tuning in, is Wrecking Religion. And we're going to look specifically at these verses, this one verse in Hosea 6:6, and it is repeated by Jesus in Matthew 9, but with a little twist in the English translation that needs to be twisted back. So this wrecking ball has an exact location, an exact destination, and it is specific to its use. So let's look at Hosea 6:6 again today. Yesterday was divine delight, because I want to know what delights the Lord and why Jesus repeats this verse twice in Matthew. So let's look today at Hosea 6:6 in the New American Standard Version. Says this: "For I delight in loyalty rather than sacrifice, and in the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings." All right, so for those of you who follow me on Lifting the Veil, you do know that Lifting the Veil is all about the deeper revelation of God's Word, and that doesn't mean that I'm certainly anything special. It just means that I dig a little deeper. I want to know the meaning of the Word of God in its original language, in its context, in its greater context, and then what does it mean for us today? So when I looked at this yesterday, when we were talking about divine delight, it was interesting to me because he says here in 6, I just said it, in Hosea 6:6, "For I delight in loyalty rather than sacrifice." So I wanted to look and see what Jesus, and why Jesus, and in what context, Jesus says and repeats this verse. So the first time he does it in Matthew is in Matthew, and I'm going to use the passage 9-13. So here we go. "And as Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting in the tax office, and he said to him, 'Follow me.' And he rose and followed him. And it happened that as he was reclining at the table in the house, behold, many tax gatherers and sinners came over and were dining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, 'Why is your teacher eating with the tax gatherers and sinners?' But when he, meaning Jesus, heard this, he said, "It is not for those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire compassion and not sacrifice. For I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Okay, so we're going to focus in on Matthew 9:13 when he does repeat Hosea 6:6. Do you notice the difference here? Jesus says, go and learn. Okay, he tells them to go learn what this means. And so he brings up Hosea. I love that. But he says this in this translation, "I desire compassion and not sacrifice. For I did not come to call the righteous but sinners." So here we are. He's repeating, according to the scholars, he is repeating Hosea 6:6, but it's not the same word. Okay? And there's a big difference between "I delight in loyalty" than "I desire compassion." Or your translation may say mercy. As a matter of fact, your translation in Hosea 6:6 may say "I delight in mercy." And then it goes on in Matthew 9:13 and says, "I desire mercy and not sacrifice." Okay. So I got really interested because, I'm just that kind of a nerd. I'm sort of this edgy evangelist, I'm told. And I get irritated when I can't line something up. I want to know what's going on there, because if Jesus repeats Hosea 6:6, I want to know what it really was in the original language. And so here we go. In the Hebrew 6:6, he is all about loyalty. That word is hesed. It's loyalty. It clearly is loyalty. So why is it translated? Even in Spiro Soriades, my favorite Hebrew Greek scholar, did he mess up? Well, kind of looks that way. Here we go. If the meaning of hesed could make such a big difference in Hebrew words, it could also make a difference in the words of a very famous Hebrew-speaking person named Jesus. And this comes from the website on the Hebrew language. I've written several articles for many years about the Hebrew isms of his language. What if the translators made the same mistake with Jesus' words as they did when they translated hesed as elios, the Greek word for mercy, in the Septuagint? Let's take a few examples of how returning to the meaning of hesed would affect the teachings of Jesus. Okay, hang with me. I think it's important. So he goes on and references Matthew 9:9-13, and I will reference this scholar appropriately on my Facebook page, Sandra Leslie White Ministries. But he says in there that if he put in this passage in Matthew 9:13, when Jesus said, "I desire loyalty," instead of elios, mercy and not sacrifice, so I came to call the righteous not sinners, okay, then it changes the meaning, does it not, of his teaching. For I desire hesed, meaning loyalty, not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. Okay, so even though most English translations use mercy in both Hosea and Matthew, what happens when we replace it with loyalty? Does it make a difference? All right, well, I want to say that it does. I want to talk about loyalty. I believe that what the original Hebrew, and I saw it. I looked into the Hebrew dictionary. I looked closely into some other Hebrew scholars' work, and I saw every single time Hosea 6:6 in the Hebrew is "I delight in loyalty." Now, that makes perfect sense in the context here. I delight in loyalty rather than sacrifice, and the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. Well, that makes sense. Okay, if you look in the context, it makes sense that he delights in loyalty rather than sacrifice. knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. So loyalty and knowledge of God goes really well together. To me, does it to you? To be loyal to him, to know him, to understand that he is faithful when we are not, to understand that we're to remain loyal in spite of our circumstances, and that whatever our sacrifices or burnt offerings or religion might teach us, those practices will not sustain us when our circumstances are wretched, right? Okay, so what he wants to do is use his own word as a wrecking ball, okay, against religion. Title of the message today is Wrecking Religion. Jesus really came to wreck the religious teaching of the day, and Yahweh is doing the same thing centuries earlier in Hosea 6:6. So what he wants is loyalty, is a deep and abiding relationship with him that is without waver. So think about who you are really loyal to. Do you have anyone in your life that you are loyal to without waver? Without waver. So this is what he wants. Now, Jesus, in the context of calling Matthew, see, I think it's so interesting. We got to stay in the context. He's a wrecking ball here too, because he's already going after a tax collector to be his disciple. Okay? He was Jewish, okay, so that fits the mold. But he was a tax collector. He worked for the Roman government. He took money from the Jews. He was not a popular guy. So Jesus is already a wrecking ball here going, okay, I'm going to call a tax collector. Not only that, I'm going to go have dinner with him and his friends, and I'm going to eat, and I'm going to drink, and I'm going to be called a glutton and a drunkard, because that's what I do. But the Pharisees come, the religious come, and they question this. And he goes on and answers, it's not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire loyalty and not sacrifice, because I did not come to call the righteous but sinners. So he called Matthew. He called this sinner to follow him, went into his house. He's a wrecking ball, not only to the religious rulers of the day, but perhaps to his own people, his own disciples who are following him into Matthew's house. They have some problems with some of that. So I think what we have to see clearly here is that Jesus is saying loyalty to him, not mercy, but loyalty to him over religion. So relationship with Jesus over religion. If there's any message throughout the Old Testament, surprisingly enough, all the way into the New, all the way into where we are today, it is about relationship with God through Jesus and this remarkable, adventuresome life he gives us, living, eating, and drinking among sinners to bring them to himself. So, if we are stuck in our religion, right, then we are not going to go outside of the box, and we're not going to reach out to those who we consider sinners. We don't want to be associated with them. We don't want to be seen with them. We want to stay in our holy place of habitation. But if we're there, we don't live a life in relationship with Jesus. He is a wrecking ball. He's there to wreck religion in our life, in my life, and yours, and in the lives of those who are really bound to rules and regulations, who think that following Jesus is all about being good. Well, the only way to be good is to follow Jesus. So he's the one that transforms us into what is good. And in his eyes, we are good. In him, we are all we will ever be. So I'm excited about this. We'll continue on with it tomorrow. God bless you today.